The Cold Hard Truth now has your Premier access with Premier Panton.
Hello, everyone. This is Wayne Panton. Come and join me on Cayman Mar Road's Premier Access every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. for a frank and open Q&A session. I'm here to answer your questions about the issues that concern you the most. Tune into YouTube and Facebook Live on Wednesday. We will see you there.
Full transparency, answering your questions, down to earth, accountable, and accessible to who matters. You. Don't miss Premier Access on the Cold Hard Truth, spilling the tea like no one else.
All right, folks, good evening and welcome to another edition of Premier Access with Premier Panton. We are live and direct on Bobo 89.1 FM and also on YouTube and Facebook for all of you who are watching online. Good evening, folks. It has been a long day, and can I just tell you, I'm a little bit tired, but the show must go on. We are waiting for the premiere. I know that he had a super busy day today, so we're going to give him a few minutes just to be able to join us in the studio. And we're going to find out what he was busy doing. He's taking his, sustainability aspect of his ministry extremely seriously. And we were just reminiscing and a little bit upset that we weren't able to jump in on that event. But next time we'll organize it so that we can maybe pull some of the feed into both our radio listeners, which is a little bit more challenging, as well as our social media listeners. But we will get there, folks. So good evening to one and good evening to all. So much. Thank you, Sonia, for joining us. She says, good evening, Sandy. So let's go ahead and bring the premiere in. Good evening, Premier Panton. How are you?
Good evening, Sandra. I'm not bad. Thank you very much.
Good.
A long day.
I'm super tired today. Some days you just really feel it, and today is definitely one of those days where I feel like I could go to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm feeling it. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a minute because I know we were traveling, I think, at one point. You were overseas, and then there was something else that was going on. So let's do a little bit of catch up here. And then, of course, folks, do remember that you can call into the studio at any time. 936-2626 is a telephone number. You can join in the conversation if you have any questions or comments for the premiere. This is one way in which you're able to access him directly, and he answers all your questions, quite frankly. So you were in Miami recently for a conference. It was a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. I think the week before I was in Barbados, and then I was in Miami sort of the week after to attend the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum, which is as it sounds, a forum designed to promote and highlight renewable energy and the transition to renewable energy in the Caribbean. So
yes.
I spent a couple days there, and we had quite a number of stakeholder meetings. Interestingly, it was an opportunity for a number of heads of state to have meetings. So, there was I had some colleagues from Bermuda that I was meeting with, and also Bahamas. The Bahamas Prime Minister and his team came for a meeting. So it was a very useful discussion. The presentations were good, and anything that talks about us as small island states in the Caribbean doing what we have to do to decarbonize our economy, to stabilize our energy prices, and to keep money within our economies rather than having to pay it overseas to buy fossil fuel. Anything that promotes that is a good thing, and I will always want to be a part of that conversation, if not leading conversations like that.
Yes, and I mean it's an uphill battle, I think, around the world when people look at all the elements of what sustainability means,
Yeah.
climate sustainability, economic sustainability. There's just so much that is involved in that. Of course, we know that on the environmental and the climate side, that is something that is very near and dear to your heart personally. So this evening, you were at another event that was a climate focused event. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So this was the start of our climate risk assessment public consultations.
Hmm.
So we have a team from the UK, or two teams from the UK really, um, out who are experts in a variety of areas. Um, they were out, or have been out since Monday. They've been engaging in media interaction, but also this morning was the start of um, the 2 day session on risk assessments. Basically, what they have done is they have worked through a sort of desktop exercise
Hmm.
to identify a long list, um, a relatively long list of threats. Um, I think there's about 52 in total,
Wow.
and those lists basically have been they are based on biodiversity and habitat threats.
Hmm.
This is where it's important for people to understand, and you touched on it earlier. This isn't just about the environment. Obviously, we are looking at what are the threats to the country caused by um, or potentially caused by climate change. Uh,
Hmm.
so today was about reviewing the list, and I think there's about 28 today. But reviewing the list of risks that have been anticipated or projected in relation to um, biodiversity and habitat for obviously flora and fauna in the country.
Hmm.
Um, and they were going through. There was a series of experts, local agency experts, as well as some regional ones participating online through the equivalent of Zoom, and they they were doing a risk assessment. You know, how likely is it that this event is, or these types of events, going to happen? What is
Hmm.
the magnitude of the impact, and what do we prioritize these at? You know, um, and that helps to sort of give you an idea of whether it's a high risk, a medium risk, and you know how much energy and time and effort and resources you should be directing at these risks tomorrow versus the next day or the next day. And I'm saying that I'm not obviously talking about this week. I'm
Hmm.
talking
Hmm.
about just in the long term. Um, so tomorrow there is a review going on of um, I think it's about 30 risks. Um, there are 32 risks. I can't remember exactly what the number is, but those relate to socioeconomic factors. And clearly that's very important, right? And this sustainability is um, not just about the environment. Sustain and resiliency and sustainability it also includes um, societal impact as well as economic impact.
Hmm.
You know, if we think that if anybody thinks that climate change is nothing to worry about, um, they need to think about how our economy and our people would sustain themselves um, with an island that's halfway underwater, right? Um, that is going to be cataclysmic, um, and these are the types of risks that we face in the Caribbean. All of us. I mean, yes, we have some islands that are higher, that have They have hills, but if you look at those islands, um, most of them all have settlements that are around the edges of the shore, and the lower lying flatland areas, whatever flatland areas they have. So whether they have hills or not, there's going to be significant impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Cayman has an average height above sea level of around 7 feet, and there are some places with high residential density that's lower than that. Um, and sometimes it's around 4 or 5 feet. So we could have significant impacts. It's something for us to be concerned about. It's something for us to plan for. It's something for us to build resiliency against, and to ensure that we understand when we may face these risks and how we address them. Um, that is only the smart thing to do. You have to plan to address risks in business. You have to plan to address risks as a country. No matter what you do, if you need to understand what the risk profile is, and what factors could impact you, and how you mitigate those. So it is very, very important for us. And to be honest, for a government today to not be concerned about sustainability and about climate change, um, and identifying what the risks are and how to address them, um, they're being irresponsible. Um, so what this list and what this grading and assessment will do is, as I said, tell us what our risk matrix looks like. Tell us what the various factors are, when they might happen, and how serious they may be, and what kind of impact they
Mm-hmm.
might have. And it will then allow us, once we have the report in September on the basis of this, um, it will then give us a strong background, and underlying information against which to update um, our climate change policy, um, and start to put in place or ensure that we have lined up strategies that mitigate those risks, and address those, as and when they're projected to start arising. So it's a
It's a,
critical issue
yes.
for us from an economic perspective. It's a critical issue for us from a quality of life perspective. At the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, it's you could say it is, very much existential. It is something that could destroy our country and destroy our way of life, um, and we cannot allow that. We have to address that. We have to address it both in terms of decarbonization, in terms of reducing the increase in global temperatures, post the industrial age, um, but also we've got to build resiliency. We've got to create sustainability that will take us through these difficulties.
Right. Well, good evening to Laura Young. She says, I'm happy to hear that we're progressing in this risk assessment, which is critical to our survival. In my opinion, we're behind in addressing the critical matter, but glad to see that we're now progressing. Flashpoint says, what actual policies and changes have been enacted by the PAC administration to help mitigate the impact of climate change?
Well, um, you have to understand your risks first, in
Right.
order to actually do something that is worthwhile doing.
Mhm.
Um, these activities and actions are not going to be cheap. They're going to cause inconvenience in some cases. It is going to represent a change in the way we have the way our economy and our system and our lives have been built. Um, People who love to drive internal combustion engines, cars with internal combustion engines that make a lot of noise and roar down the road, guess what? We've got to get away from that. We've got to electrify our modes of transport. Um, we've got to learn to do things differently. We've got to manage our lower the amount of trash we utilize. We've got to stop having single-use plastics all over our environment. Um,
Mhm.
we have got to change the way we generate energy. We've got to reduce the amount of energy we consume. Part of that is, by making a conscious effort to reduce it. Part of that is ensuring that we have energy efficiency in our homes and in our businesses.
Hmm.
Um, all of that is going to contribute to a number of things. One is it's going to reduce the amount um, of pollution, amount of contribution to the greenhouse gases in the environment and the atmosphere. And guess what? It's also very positive in terms of the cost, because if you use less energy, and the cost of the energy has been stabilized, um, and you're using less of it, you're spending less money, you're saving money. So these are all ways that we have to respond, and this is a very critical approach. Now, we had a climate change policy drafted in 2011, and I will put my hand up and I'll tell you that it pains me at this point that 3 years of effort was put into that by a lot of people in Cayman at a time when perhaps these issues were not viewed as interesting or even necessary. Um, and yes, I was a minister, and I was a minister for environment between 2013 to 2017. Um, I got a lot of environmental things done. I got the National Conservation Act as it is now in place. But one thing that I regret not having the time to deal with, and I regret it, somebody else not bringing it to me and putting it on my desk and saying, this is something we need to deal with as quickly as we can, is the draft climate change policy. And I'm telling you that the work that we're doing now, and thank you very much to the governor in the UK, who have paid for these experts to come out to assist us with the climate risk assessment. Um, this work is not going to, I'm determined it's not going to take 3 years for us to get a new climate change policy in place and updated, have it adopted, and then build the strategies from that. You have to be clear and systematic about it.
Hmm.
And the fact that we are engaged in a variety of different things, raising awareness, addressing, some of the concerns that may exist. In some countries, it's not popular. In some cultures, it's not popular to talk about issues around climate change. There are a lot of deniers out there. Hell, there are still people in the world that insist the world is flat. They have a conference of flat earthers that happens every year. So we've got some strange ideas floating around out there. But this is not one of them. This is legitimate. This is an issue for us to be concerned with. And we are in an area, we live in a paradise, but there are risks that come with living in a paradise. And we know what those risks are. We know that that hurricanes impact us, have impacted us in the past, will undoubtedly impact us again in the future. And what we don't want is another Dorian scenario has happened in the Bahamas, up in the Abacos in the Bahamas. We don't want that happening in Cayman. We had Ivan, which was close enough as I want to ever get to a bad hurricane. I don't want to see anything like that again happen to this country. I certainly don't want a Dorian scenario, which lasted longer and had even greater impacts with higher winds than Ivan did. But that is, we're 2 weeks away. No, 2 weeks. 7 days, 8 days away from
From hurricane season.
hurricane
Another week.
season.
Yep, exactly a week. Yep.
And we have discussions going on with the experts that center around, should we move the start of hurricane season to the middle of May now? Right? These are legitimate discussions. Not, not people on the fringe talking about this.
Yes.
These are people in the middle of the road, um, in very credible people discussing whether we should change the official start of hurricane season to May. All because we have had these things happening. The climate is changing, the weather is changing, storms are getting stronger. We right now have a huge amount of heat in the Caribbean Sea, and that's a perfect scenario for the development of significant weather systems that have a very significant impact on us.
Mm.
Um, and that's something that happens annually. Um, if we have sea level rise, that's not going to happen annually. That's going to be permanent. So we've got to be a part of a determined approach by the world. We don't. Yes, we don't. We're not going to be. Our responsibility in it is going to be infinitesimally small, but the
Mm-hmm.
impact on us is going to be 100% if
Mm-hmm.
we don't be a part of the solution to try to address it and try to demand that those countries that are contributing the vast amount, or the vast majority of um, the the carbon dioxide and other gases, other greenhouse gases to the atmosphere and causing the temperature increases, we've got to hold them accountable. We've got to demand that they do something about it.
Mm. And Michelle joining us this evening. Good evening, Anne Michelle. She says we need to look at the following: banning single use plastics, product packaging, not buying products that are excessively packaged, look at available arable land that can be used to grow fruit and vegetables, creating some food security. Most importantly, we need to seriously implement alternative and renewable and natural energy sources, water, hydro, and sun, that can be sourced and distributed on island to reduce the immense reliability we have in fuel from overseas and the ever increasing. And unfortunately, the rest of that comment got cut off. She also continues a bit later on and says, also stop the importing of fad and whim products, i.e., the foods from other countries that are not widely used by the general population, as this puts prices up for all of us. Also, clothing, fashion-based, and home consumables that are either seasonal styles or go out of fashion quickly just because it's new and trendy. Good evening to Ms. Beulah, who's watching. Jared says, could the Premier answer why the CPA disregards recommendations from the Department of Environment for construction?
So in relation to that, you know, we unfortunately have a situation right now where we have one part of government um, judicially reviewing the actions of another part. So we have a JR which is coming on, I think in June,
Mm-hmm.
sometime in June. Um, and obviously I can't speak much about it, but it's an indication of, um, I think, what may be a long-standing issue, a long-standing conflict, um, and the reality is that the national conservation law, contrary to what those with an agenda against the law have, does not allow the DOE or the National Conservation Council to dictate anything to the Central Planning Authority. In the vast majority of cases, um, and when I say vast majority, I'm talking about something on the order of like 97% of the time, um, the National Conservation Council, via the DOE, um, are making recommendations to the Central Planning Authority. They are not binding recommendations, um, by and large, and the Central Planning Authority can consider those, um, and that's what they're required to do, but they can ignore them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, clearly, it's a problem if they don't even consider them at all. Um, but the reality is they can just consider them and ignore them. That is what the National Conservation Act um, effectively provides. Now, when it comes to impacts on areas which are protected areas, um, that is when you get into directives that can be issued by the National Conservation Council via the DOE, and those directives are binding. And the action I referred to earlier relates to a situation in which the Central Planning Authority apparently decided that they were going to ignore a binding direction. So, um, what this represents really is a long-standing issue and a conflict between um, the perceptions, um, on the one hand, that um, the planning officials in the country ought to be able to decide what happens and how property is developed, whether it's developed at all, and what conditions relate to that development. Um, and on the other side, a scenario where there needs to be a recognition that if that we just can't continue developing um, without taking into consideration that the amount of land that and the natural environment, the untouched environment, is shrinking all the time. The truth is, we live on one Earth, and we cannot live without nature. We must coexist with nature. And if the natural systems are not in balance and are not working, then we all die.
Mm-hmm.
We can't live on an Earth that is not functioning properly. It doesn't have a natural ecosystem that functions properly. Um, this is the main gist of what we're trying to avoid now, because we have been burning fossil fuels for decades and decades and decades, over 100 years or more. Um, but in the post-industrial age, it's obviously gone up very rapidly. Um, and the fossil fuel companies have known this for some time. They have been able to identify as far back in the mid to late 70s and early 80s that burning fossil fuels is converting carbon that's locked in the ground into carbon that goes into the air, and methane as well, and it generates a heating effect on the planet. So our average temperatures have been going up. And what we've been trying to achieve is a maximum increase of 1.5 degrees centigrade. Um, right now, we're nowhere near on target to achieve that.
Mm.
Um, we may be somewhere in the region of 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. That's the trajectory. Um, it may even be a little higher than that in some cases. Um, but we have to try to get back to that target of 1.7, because scientists are able to assess, they're able to predict with some degree of certainty, not complete certainty, but some degree of certainty, of what that is going to mean for Earth, and in terms of the conditions under which we will be able to live, and the impacts that may occur, whether it's weather, whether it's drought, these types of things. Um, they can sort of predict with some degree of certainty what that may mean, and it's by no means going to be pleasant,
Mm-hmm.
but it is one which is survivable, and one which we could learn to adapt to. Um, but we're not even at this point on target for 1.5.
Wow.
So that's what we need to do. This is why we need to move with a level of speed and scale that significantly alters our trajectory in terms of the amount of CO2 equivalents, carbon dioxide equivalents that we are generating in the atmosphere. We need to move very fast and very quickly now to reverse this trend so that we can get back on a trajectory of heating increase, which is closer to the 1.5 degrees. And I don't mind telling you that's one of the extreme senses of urgency that I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are people who might disagree, and in the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of people have disagreed about this issue of climate change and the potential impacts. But two things are clear. One is less and less people are disagreeing. 97, 98% of the scientists in the world who have any idea about climatology and the physical processes at work all agree now of as to what is happening and what the potential impacts may be. But even further than that, we have been able to measure that. We've been able to demonstrate what's happening. We've got satellites that fly all around the Earth, orbiting the Earth and measuring ice sheets and measuring the changes, measuring the amount of reflection of the sun that occurs. So we're losing ice cover, we're losing snow cover, we're reflecting less radiation. That means we're absorbing more energy. Our ice sheets are getting thinner. The Arctic's ice sheets are getting smaller. The North Pole, I think in a couple of the Arctic, I should say, in a couple of years is anticipated to be ice free for most of the year, if not all year long. Not completely ice free, but I mean, normally the North Pole, the Arctic, during the winter time is completely locked in by ice. It is predicted that may not happen during the winter time.
Oh.
So we have more fresh water going into the sea. We have temperature increasing. They've measured significant average temperature increases in the Arctic now. It is beyond doubt that significant climate change is occurring. It is occurring faster than was originally predicted and projected. And that means, to me, I don't know about anybody else, but if something is chasing you, you need to run faster than something that's chasing you, right? That means we've got to make changes. We've got to accept those changes. And a part of the answer is innovation. A part of it is developing new technologies. But the truth is, that's going to come at the back end. Most of the work is going to have to be through the things that we already know works, and that's having energy created through renewable energy,
Mm-hmm.
not building coal-fired plants, not in our case, converting from burning diesel to having solar energy, and these are all positive things for us. If we spend, between 150 and 200 million dollars a year in fossil fuels, and that money goes out to buy that, because the fossil fuel isn't produced here, it goes out, we buy it from somewhere else, the money is paid out. If that 200 million dollars stayed in Cayman and was allowed to work within the economy,
Mm-hmm.
we would have probably $300 to $500 million worth of additional economic benefit just from that alone. We'd have more stable energy costs, and likely even cheaper energy costs. as well. So this this is potentially a number of wins in a number of areas, a number of very positive things, but we've got to do it in order to um, you know eliminate or reduce our risk of climate change impacts. So this is our friends from CFAS and the UK office on oh gosh, I know I was going to forget it now, but it's ecology and hydrology,
Hmm.
UK CEH, and CFAS is the Center for oh gosh, I'll tell you in a second. Center for Environment, Fisheries, and Aquaculture. These acronyms, um, but they're here helping us do this risk assessment, and the public, very importantly, the public is able to participate in this, and that's what's necessary. It's essential for people to understand the risks. It's essential for people to be able to contribute to this discussion because it affects all of us.
Just a quick pause there, folks. At some point, you might have noticed that my studio went dark. So we do have a power outage in the Newlands part of the Savannah area, impacting 2,979 customers. So if you live in the area, you'll know, yes, sirree, that this is happening as we speak. I think generator power just kicked in for me literally today. They just finished the work on this. So I tell you what, Marlon is he's not one to often say "I told you so," but he's been saying for a while. That generator is going to come in so handy for you one day when you're having a show. And look at that, first day. So the show definitely must go on. So Melanie says the NCL aligns with the Constitution and the 97 development plan. Why does the CPA repeatedly ignore things like character, massing, scale, and culture when they are enshrined in multiple laws? Who is responsible for directing the CPA?
Well, the Central Planning Authority is they have access to legal advice, and they have policies that they operate under, which is supposed to reflect the legal provisions. Um, I can't tell you that, and I won't tell you because obviously I don't agree that um, they're always reflecting what they should. Um, I think this is a process that we have to work on. Um, we have to make sure that we um, get decisions from the CPA which reflects what is needed in the country, not just from a development perspective, not just from an economic perspective, but also from a social perspective and also an environmental and protection of nature perspective. We have we've had a system. This is one of the things that I'm telling you that we have to change our perspective and our approach on. We cannot continue with the same mindset and same approach to doing things that we have in the past. Um, the country, it is no longer good enough for the country to just, for any government, for example, to say, yes, we've got economic growth and it's 3%. We need to be making sure that there are lots of other risks that are being addressed, and that while we may have economic growth, that we have good, strong employment opportunities for people in the country who can take advantage of that, who are able to take advantage of those, and to live their best lives and to contribute to society in a very positive way, and feel happy about it, and feel that that they live in a country that affords them those opportunities and allows them to live a high quality of life. Um, so this is a process, and I think it's a continuing reassessment of what we need to do as a country. And unfortunately, I think it is something that we do need to accelerate.
Hmm. Well, Laura joins the conversation. Hello, Laura. Laura says currently overdevelopment is more of a threat to Cayman than climate change. For example, seawalls causing beach erosion, mangrove destruction, changing your natural habitat, and microclimate.
Um, from a short-term perspective, yes, it all contributes to problems. So, from a short-term perspective, overdevelopment can be a bigger threat at the moment than climate change. But the same things that um, result from overdevelopment can also contribute and accelerate climate change and the impacts again. So we need to build in resiliency. We need to ensure that um, what we're doing is identifying the risks that we are likely or possibly going to face and mitigate those risks. Do what we have to do to minimize the impacts so that you can manage those. Um, it's not complicated, but it requires a change in perspective and a change in the way we have done things in the past. It doesn't mean that we lose opportunities. It doesn't mean that we cannot have a strong economy. It just means that we have to do things differently. And you know, the world has gone through many, many changes um, over the life of mankind on Earth. And mankind has gone through. We don't do things. We don't live by lamplight anymore. We don't hunt whales and boil their blubber to get oil anymore, to create light. Um, the problem is we use the remnants of dead whales,
Hmm.
or fossils, to do it, and that is unlocking carbon, and that is creating the problems. And we've got to figure out how to change our economies and adjust the way we do things on a very large scale in to make a difference. And we are if we don't do it, we are letting our children down. We are leaving them on earth that because none of us have ever figured out a way to get out of this life alive, for sure. We are going to be leaving whatever. We're not taking anything with us. We are leaving our legacy. And if our legacy is an earth that cannot sustain our children in the long term, then we are failing. And it's quite as simple as that. And I'll be honest with you, I struggle with it, Sandra, sometimes, because I know I know the fear that it creates in children. It fills me with fear thinking about um, failing our children,
Hmm.
and it must create fear in the children of today. I've seen it. I've heard them articulate it, um, and we cannot fail them. We do not have the right to continue to protect our prosperity in the same ways, doing the things in the same ways as we've always done it, um, at the cost of their opportunity to prosper and live. We have to find a way to ensure that both happens, and it can be done, and we have ways of doing it, um, and that's just what we have to pursue. There are more jobs being created in um, the sustainable energy area, renewable energy area today than there are um, existing in the fossil fuel industry. Um, we've just got to let go of these old way of doing things, and pursue the better ways of doing it,
Hmm.
um, for the benefit of the world and our children. Anyway, we can talk about a lot of other things
Yes.
too if you want. Sorry.
Absolutely. Well, less than 15 minutes left in the program. Denver has a question that we hear people over and over asking. They say, "Do you really think the Cayman Islands makes any minor contributions to this topic? Probably 0.000000001%, because we are so small." So, how do you address people who say, "Listen, it doesn't matter what we do. We're so small. Let's just continue not doing our part"?
Okay, so um, you don't go to the doctor then. If you feel bad, you don't want to feel better. If you think you may have um, a disease that you can be cured of now with early detection and treatment, just leave it alone. No, this is an issue that is going to come whether we like it or not. And I, for one, am not interested in sitting quietly and sitting still and accepting the impacts. Um, yes, as I said before, we are not the individual. We're not, as a country, um, responsible for these kinds of impacts. But we can assess how culpable we are because we live in the same kind of way um, as the developed countries that are largely responsible. And the truth is, China, for example, has lots of coal-fired plants, and they've got a huge population. They contribute massively, and they need to make changes. Um, the U.S. does as well. They got a much smaller population, but they contribute even more on a per capita basis. Now, if we compare ourselves on a per capita basis, we can work out um, how many tons of CO2 equivalents we're contributing per capita to the environment, to the atmosphere, and we can compare that to a world average. And
Hmm.
the reality is, if we do that, we are a part of the problem because our per capita contribution for CO2 equivalents is higher than many other developed countries that are having a much bigger impact than we are because they're a bigger country, lots more people, lots more industrial and activity and polluting activity and energy generation. Um, so we can assess ourselves on that basis, and the reality is we've got to get our house in order, so that at the same time we have the credibility to go out there and say, hey, you've got to get yours in order too. You're because of what you're doing, we are going to suffer the first impacts and the most major impacts. So you've got to put yourself in a position where you can address it. You cannot just say, well, we can't do anything about it because we're not a big part of the problem. Yes, we are a part of the problem. We are all a part of the problem. Every one of the 8 billion people that live on this planet are a part of the problem, and every one of the 8 billion people that live on this planet have to be a part of the solution.
All right, Denver. Hopefully that answers your question. Folks, less than 10 minutes left. Don't forget you can call in at 936-2626 is the telephone number. We're being joined here with Premier Panton as part of the Premier Access Program every other Wednesday. You can find him here discussing topical issues. We've been talking a little bit about development and the environment, but there's so many other issues. But just a quick comment. There's been a bit of criticism this past week of the PAC government that on the issue of plastics and the environment. We had Mr. Oli Rush, who actually took an amazing swim around the island, potentially even setting a world record, swam for some 36 hours. And when he came in, there was no government official there as part of the crowd that had gathered to greet him. Can you explain what happened? Why was there a misstep, and why were there not just PAC members, but I don't think there was any MPs there at all?
No, I think that's right. I don't know whether there was not enough done on their side in terms of um, raising um, the profile of this event. Um, I can tell you where I was. I can tell you where the PAC government was. We were in a caucus meeting dealing with issues of the country.
Mhm.
Um, so we weren't just off having lunch or cruising around doing different things. Um, we were in a room. We were there because I think this happened around 5:30 or so. Um, we were in our normal caucus meeting around that time, dealing with the issues of the country. Um, and I became aware of it during the course of that, or just have a. It makes no sense to try to drive through the traffic to get to West Bay at that point in the day and hope to catch anybody there who's already coming ashore. But I want to say this, which is that we met Ollie Rush this afternoon
Mhm.
um, and that is the caucus of the government. Met Ollie Rush this afternoon. We certainly congratulated him for the stellar performance that he carried on. I mean, that kind of endurance to swim around the island 60 something miles in over 30 hours is pretty significant. Um, and to want to do it, to be motivated to do it um, for support of things like banning single-use plastics or plastic-free Cayman. Um, those are all laudable things. That's something that Sandra, that I would absolutely support at any time of the day. Um, so while we weren't there on that occasion, and I would say we probably weren't there because it just wasn't something that was put on our radar. It wasn't something. There wasn't enough done around, you know, uh, PR and ensuring that there was anybody. I mean, as you said, as you pointed out, no MPs seem to have been there, whether
Mhm.
they're opposition or government. So clearly, there must have been some sort of breakdown somewhere. Doesn't mean we don't value what he's done. It doesn't mean we don't acknowledge him and we don't support that. So we met with representatives from um, Plastic Free Cayman this afternoon, along with Ollie Rush. And as I said, we congratulated him. I gave them an indication of where we were in relation to the single-use plastics um, and the proposal to ban those. The previous government had been doing some work on that, which got sidetracked by events and probably mostly COVID. Um, and I'm at this point, um, what I've indicated to my team is that I want to have single-use plastics bans in place by the third quarter, in the third quarter. Um, so that is the target that we have. Amongst all the other things that we're doing, um, that is something that definitely put on the table to make sure that we get addressed. Other countries in the Caribbean have done it. It was actually an issue that I was planning to start doing when I was minister back in um, 2017. But of course, I didn't win re-election at that time, so I couldn't address it. Um, but the previous government did get around to moving it forward a bit, but they weren't able to accomplish that either. We're definitely going to get it done before the end of this year. Hopefully by third quarter, we'll have that in place.
Hmm.
So we definitely support everything that they do. Definitely
Mhm.
support Ollie Rush. Um, and one of the sad things is that, Sandra, even if we ban single-use plastics in Cayman, we're still going to have a significant amount of the problem of plastics in the sea drifting
Mhm.
onto our shore. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, because we must do it for the
Mhm.
same reasons I articulated earlier. We have got to be a part of the solution.
Right.
But the problem is that we have a lot of plastics that are floating at sea. There's a projection that in a few years there's going to be more plastic in the sea, more items of plastic in the sea than there are fish.
Mm.
About that.
It's horrible.
right? It's and again, it's a reflection of just convenient overconsumption. And this is why, this is one of the things I say we've got to change the way we do things.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just go for, convenience to get things done. We've got to go in and do things deliberately in ways that recognize that we have a planet and an environment and an ecosystem to respect and protect because it enables us to survive.
Is there anything that's being done to educate the next generation of children? Do we have anything in the curriculum, for example, any environmental based courses, sustainability courses for, elementary school kids, middle school, high school kids in the
Yeah,
public?
I know that they they do a lot of that in school. I know that um, I can't tell you that I can point to specifics of the curriculum. Um, but even when I was a minister back in 13 to 17, minister for the environment, then um, we had a lot of kids, a lot of school um, school teachers who were engaging their children in discussions then. You know, and kids today understand these issues like we never had the opportunity to do ourselves as children. You know, kids today are born. They seem to be born with the uh, ability to, or to. They have this. It's almost like genetic memory. They come out swiping. Yeah, this is how you manipulate the electronics and get things done and move. Go through menus and whatnot. Um, Kids today understand these issues from a young age a lot better than we do, and they understand. Many of them understand that it is their future that is at risk, and it is our responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to address it. Um, we a few years ago we had the kids, the young people going on strikes, and that has continued. We have people like Greta Thunberg, as she's perhaps no longer the young girl that sat out in front of the parliament in Stockholm complaining and protesting about the failure to address climate change. She's now become an international celebrity and figurehead for young people concerned about these issues. And the ages of people, I think, are just going down lower and lower. Young kids are really concerned about it, and they talk about it. Their teachers talk about it with them.
Yep.
Their parents talk about it with them. And we've it I think it impacts even their mental health.
Hmm.
And why wouldn't it?
Well, I
If you
mean,
felt that you didn't have much in the way of a future, why wouldn't you be concerned about it? Yeah.
absolutely. And I can tell you, I've got a 5-year-old that gets offended when she sees litter in the ground or she sees someone throwing something down. She literally says that, it upsets her to see that. And she wants to go around picking up garbage everywhere we go. And of course, that
Exactly.
can certainly be a very dangerous task to undertake. But folks, we do have to keep to a very, very tight schedule because we are on radio for this program. So, Premier Panton, thank you so much for taking time again out of your busy schedule to speak with us. I think we'll re-air this perhaps during one of the morning segments because we have hundreds definitely listening on the morning segment. In the evening, sometimes people get a bit busy, but thank you once again for being committed to coming on the program every other week. Talking about the issues that concern people in this country, addressing our concerns, and taking questions and comments directly from our audience as well.
Yeah. Sandra, thank you. Always happy to do that, and always happy to participate and be available to the people of the country. It is a part of our commitment to service to our country.
All right, folks. So have a pleasant evening. Premier Panton, thank you again, and we'll see you in another 2 weeks.
All the best. Take care. Bye bye.
The Cold Hard Truth now has your Premier access with Premier Panton.
Hello everyone, this is Wayne Panton. Come and join me on Cayman Mile Road's Premier Access every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. for a frank and open Q&A session. I'm here to answer your questions about the issues that concern you the most. Tune in to YouTube and Facebook Live on Wednesday. We will see you there.
Full transparency, answering your questions, down to earth, accountable, and accessible to who matters. You. Don't miss Premier access on the Cold Hard Truth, spilling the tea like no one else.